Let me give you some advice, bastard. Never forget what you are. The rest of the world will not. Wear it like armor, and it can never be used to hurt you.
What the hell do you know about being a bastard?
All dwarves are bastards in their father's eyes.
For all the colorful and charismatic characters in the worlds of A Song of Ice and Fire, Tyrion Lannister has become the de facto fan favorite. Like many fans, I view Tyrion as an extension of the author himself, George R.R. Martin. Both grew up as outsiders who carved their paths and personalities by losing themselves in books. Reading was used as a tool by both to expand their minds and their positions in the world, and they are both exceptionally clever. Tyrion Lannister is known for his legendary wit, and he has also proven himself to be one of the great players of the Game of Thrones. All this, coupled with Peter Dinklage's brilliant portrayal of the character, has made Tyrion one of the most interesting characters over the first 5 seasons of the show. And then there was a drop-off in seasons 6 and 7, where Tyrion suddenly became less interesting. Dare I say, boring. A lot of this could be blamed on the show's decision to kill off Sir Barristan Selmy, the legendary Westerosi knight who served as Daenerys Targaryen's most trusted advisor. Rather than keeping both Tyrion and Barristan as advisors to Daenerys, the showrunners decided to morph Tyrion into a Tyrion-Barristan hybrid. Even though most fans were upset by Sir Barristan's death, no one would ever mistake him for a complex or highly interesting character. Likeable? Yes, he was one of the few honest and honorable characters on the show, and he was a legendary sword fighter, what's not to like? But he was a side character, not one of the main characters.
Even now I could cut through the 5 of you like carving a cake!
Barristan's death is a major change from the books. In A Dance with Dragons, Sir Barristan is currently alive and leading the defensive marine after Daenerys was last seen surrounded by a Dothraki horde, something that also happens in the show. By killing Barristan and bringing Tyrion to Meereen, the showrunners disregarded Tyrion's complex arc from A Dance with Dragons, something that we'll discuss later in the video. They instead made him a more interesting version of Barristan Selmy, which consequently made him a far less interesting version of Tyrion Lannister. As an advisor and eventual Hand of the Queen to Daenerys, Tyrion has been relegated to the sidelines, serving as a glorified sidekick. Something that worked for a side character like Barristan Selmy, but is a detriment to one of the show's most important characters, arguably the main character. Compared to Tyrion, no other player in Westeros has made the same impact on the show's overall narrative. No character has pushed down as many dominoes as Tyrion, manipulating the game in his favor, but now his chess moves have become predictable, and even downright stupid at times. There is no doubt in my mind that Tyrion will play a strategic role in the battle against the Night King. Hopefully his military strategies are more successful in Season 8 than they were in Season 7, but his main purpose in the story's overall conclusion is to help Daenerys destroy the old world so that they can build a better one. Luckily, the Night King will provide them a black hole of opportunity. He is literally trying to destroy the world, which works out well for Daenerys. The table will be cleaned, and Daenerys' dream of setting a new world can be fully realized. And at the end of the day, Tyrion will be the one ultimately responsible for turning Daenerys' dream of spring into a reality.
Shall we begin?
In their second ever conversation after meeting, Daenerys tells Tyrion about her plans to completely decimate the hierarchy of Westeros. She refers to the great houses of Westeros as spokes on a wheel, Baratheon, Targaryen, Lannister, Stark, all trading and fighting for higher positions of power while crushing those underneath them. She wants to bring an end to the game of conquest in Westeros. She refers to this philosophy as breaking the wheel. Tyrion is initially skeptical. Daenerys' declaration is seen by Tyrion as more pretty words from a charismatic politician. According to Tyrion, Daenerys is not the first to have thoughts of stopping the wheel. But there is a key difference in her ambition and her wording. Daenerys doesn't want to stop the wheel, she wants to break it.
This one's on top, then that one's on top, and on it spins, crushing those on the ground.
It's a beautiful dream. Stopping the wheel. You're not the first person who's ever dreamt it.
I'm not going to stop the wheel. I'm going to break the wheel.
There are faster ways to kill yourself.
Not for a coward.
Before meeting Daenerys, Tyrion had given up on life. The brutal politics of Westeros and the betrayal from his own father and sister had broken him. Daenerys has shown Tyrion, like countless others before him, a ruler worthy of the name she was born with. Of course, she isn't perfect. Tyrion refers to her as a terrible child of a terrible father, but that she might be the type of terrible that keeps her people from being more so. As so many people like to remind us in the comment section of our videos, Daenerys has done terrible things to achieve her goals. She has rushed to judgment in prosecuting her suspected enemies. She sometimes falls prey to passion rather than clear judgment. After all, she is the blood of the dragon, but she has made an effort to surround herself with decent, fair-minded people, individuals who aren't afraid to challenge her and advise against her decisions. It's why she chose Tyrion Lannister as an advisor in the first place. She could tell that Tyrion was a realist and a pragmatist, and he has continually proved himself to be one of the most fair-minded leaders in Game of Thrones. But in Season 7, Daenerys begins to distrust Tyrion's advice. When Daenerys begins her quest to conquer Westeros, Tyrion starts out by cautioning restraint. Instead of outright attacking King's Landing as soon as they landed, Tyrion convinces Daenerys to commit to a siege of the capital, form a blockade with the Dornish and Ironborn fleets that will starve the city. He also convinces Daenerys to send the Unsullied army to capture Casterly Rock, the seat of House Lannister. Tyrion is unaware that the gold mines of Casterly Rock have dried up, effectively making Highgarden the richest castle in all the Seven Kingdoms, a castle that is successfully captured by Jaime Lannister. To make matters worse, the Dornish and Ironborn fleets are intercepted by Euron Greyjoy, rendering them obsolete. Tyrion's war plans ultimately lead to Daenerys losing Dorne, the Iron Islands, and the Reach. After learning of her several defeats, Daenerys begins to question Tyrion's strategy, and more importantly, she questions his loyalty. She openly challenges him in front of several main characters, questioning whether he has the will to hurt his family. Frustrated by Tyrion's plans of restraint, Daenerys insists on flying her dragons to King's Landing to attack the city with fire and blood, but Tyrion once again protests. When she turns to Jon Snow for advice, Jon reiterates Tyrion's philosophy, saying that burning King's Landing to the ground only makes Daenerys more of the same, more of what they've already seen over these past couple of years.
But if you use them to melt castles and burn cities, you're not different. You're just more of the same.
This isn't the only time Daenerys questions Tyrion's loyalty in Season 7. In this scene, the two characters are discussing their recent plan to capture a White and bring it to King's Landing, hoping to convince Queen Cersei to cease hostilities and join them in fighting against the army of the dead. Tyrion warns Daenerys that Cersei is most likely thinking of ways to murder Daenerys during their meeting, and Daenerys wants to know if Tyrion has any plans to counterattack. But he says that mass murder and deceit is not the way to build a better world. Daenerys is once again frustrated by Tyrion's unwillingness to strike at the heart of his family. This is also the second time that they discuss Daenerys' plan to break the wheel. Tyrion explains that every great ruler needs to inspire fear in his or her subjects, but if fear is all they have, then their power becomes brittle. Daenerys brings up her ancestor, Aegon the Conqueror, the Targaryen king who forged the Seven Kingdoms into one by using fire and blood. Aegon formed the kingdom that Daenerys aspires to rule. He forged the seat of power that Daenerys wishes to sit upon, and Aegon is the one who created the wheel that Daenerys plans to break. For Daenerys, breaking the wheel means breaking with family tradition. There are moments where Daenerys cannot control her impulses, like when she burned Randall and Dickon Tarly alive, a rash execution that Tyrion advised against. It's easy to see why Daenerys aspires to be like Aegon the Conqueror. As Tywin Lannister once said, every child living knows his name 300 years after his death. For Daenerys, building a better world means putting aside your ego and putting aside your legacy. Aegon built the old world as he saw fit, but Daenerys can't be Aegon if she wants to transform the old world. The conversation then turns to Daenerys' successor, a topic that Daenerys would rather not discuss. Tyrion understands that the key to truly breaking the wheel is implementing a peaceful succession of power between rulers. Tyrion mentions the Night's Watch and their method of electing a Lord Commander, and even the Ironborn, who select their ruler during an ancient tradition known as the Kingsmoot. But these suggestions only frustrate Daenerys more. She tells Tyrion that they will discuss succession after she has won the war. It's one thing to talk about breaking the wheel, it's another thing entirely to pull the chair out from under yourself. If Daenerys does ultimately win the Iron Throne, her next course of action will be deciding who sits on it next after she dies. Imagine fighting for something for 7 years, all the personal sacrifice and loss of life that has furthered Daenerys' ambition. Everything done so that she can one day destroy the thing that she has been fighting to acquire. You can understand her hesitation in discarding something that she fought so hard to win. During this conversation, Tyrion brings up the fact that Daenerys can no longer have children, and even if she could, that wouldn't be breaking the wheel. Succession of power is the foundation of every democracy, and not just succession, but a change in hand and in name. If Daenerys truly wants to break the wheel, she should insist on being succeeded by someone who isn't a Targaryen. A Targaryen child succeeding a Targaryen queen would be the same line of feudalistic succession that has dominated Westeros for hundreds of years.
But any one of them could have found your heart and ended you.
You've been thinking about my death quite a bit, haven't you? Is this one of the items you discussed with your brother in King's Landing?
I'm trying to serve you by planning for the long term.
Perhaps if you planned for the short term, we wouldn't have lost Dawn and Highgarden. We will discuss the succession after I wear the crown.
The idea of Daenerys being unable to bear children goes back to Season 1. This prophecy was made by Mirri Master, the witch who killed both Khal Drogo, Daenerys' husband, and Rhaegar Targaryen, Daenerys and Drogo's son. Ever since their murder by the hands of the Blood Witch, Daenerys has insisted that she will never have another human child, that her dragons will be her only children. Now, why Daenerys keeps insisting she will never have another child, the easy answer is she was traumatized by the witch's prophecy, and the horrific events that preceded it. Her husband was murdered, and her child was born deceased and deformed. There is clearly a part of Daenerys that no longer wishes to start a new family because she fears losing it. When Daenerys tells Jon Snow about her inability to have children, he isn't convinced. He wants to test this theory, scientific method, 10th grade biology. Now, if Daenerys and Jon were to have a child in Season 8, this would put another obstacle in the way of Tyrion's plan of peaceful succession between rulers. Westerosi tradition is that the eldest son will ascend to the throne after the king is dead. In this case, we have Queen Daenerys, so we can assume the gender of the eldest child will be irrelevant. Regardless, this will give Daenerys a new incentive to keep the feudalistic structure intact. She is already reluctant to discuss succession. If she is now able to bear children, she will be even more unlikely to cede her power to another person that isn't named Targaryen. Old traditions and habits are hard to break, especially in medieval times. The decision to give up power to another person is a lot easier to make when you don't have children yourself. But if Daenerys and Jon have a child, the matter becomes way more complicated and way more personal. Castles, titles, and lands are legacy in Westeros. Assuring your child will succeed your position of power ensures the future and safety of your family after you die. And if Daenerys and Jon do have a child, then the decision to break the wheel is no longer Daenerys' to make alone. At this point, Jon Snow is completely unaware of Daenerys' plan to break the wheel. He already has a hint that she wants to transform the world, and we can also assume that he will agree with this philosophy. Jon is familiar with democratic elections from his time serving in the Night's Watch. He himself was named Lord Commander by popular vote. Jon is also not one for the politics of Westeros. Like most Starks, he is a character that's almost free of ego. After everything he's witnessed north of the Wall, the only philosophy he adheres to is survival. Additionally, Jon is not one for war and conquest. Unlike the ambition he once had to be a great warrior, Jon no longer finds pleasure in fighting for glory.
You've been talking to Tyrion.
He is my hand.
He enjoys talking.
We all enjoy what we're good at.
I don't.
It's the reason why he cautioned Daenerys against burning King's Landing to the ground. He believes that Daenerys has a good heart and wants to make true change in Westeros. But when you add a child to the equation, ego and love become distractions, and love, as we know, is the death of duty. Both characters may want to see their child ascend to the Iron Throne simply due to pride. Both Jon and Daenerys never anticipated that either of them would have children. Jon grew up believing he was a bastard, and bastards don't inherit titles or lands. If he was to marry, his children would still have the bastard surname Snow. This was the main motivation for Jon in joining the Night's Watch. And as a member, you are not allowed to father any children or have any wives. So all of this, love, children, this is all brand new to Jon.
I'm ready to swear your oath.
You don't understand what you'd be giving up. We have no families. None of us will ever father sons.
I don't care about that.
You might, if you know what it meant.
And we all know that Daenerys believes that she is incapable of having children. But then suddenly, they have a child, and that child may change their perspective on how society should work, or should continue to work. And this is what could cause a rift between Daenerys, Jon, and Tyrion. One of the main storylines of Season 7 was Jon Snow trying to convince the other rulers of Westeros to join him in his battle against the army of the dead. He was successful in making Daenerys Targaryen an ally, but had no real plan to convince Cersei Lannister to join his cause. Tyrion is the one who suggests that they should capture a White, the zombified creatures that fight for the Night King, and bring it to King's Landing to demonstrate the real threat. This demonstration almost proves to be a success. Cersei is visibly terrified of the creature and agrees to fight with Jon and Daenerys under one condition. Jon Snow must bend the knee and pledge fealty to Cersei. But Jon makes the mistake of admitting his loyalty to Daenerys.
I ask it only of Ned Stark's son. I know Ned Stark's son will be true to his word.
That is why I cannot give you what you ask. I cannot serve two queens. And I've already pledged myself to Queen Daenerys of House Targaryen.
Cersei storms off, leaving Daenerys, Jon, Tyrion, and their allies right where they started. As a last-ditch effort, Tyrion volunteers to meet with his sister in private, a dangerous gamble. Tyrion must bargain with the woman who has sworn to see him killed.
I didn't come all this way to have my hand murdered.
I don't want Cersei to murder me either. I could have stayed in my cell and saved a great deal of trouble.
I did this. I should go.
She'll definitely murder you. I go see my sister alone. Or we all go home, and we're right back where we started.
Tyrion and Cersei trade their usual barbs, making their threats and reminiscing on all the good times, all the moments that led them to hate one another. The most important part of this scene is the moment where Tyrion deduces that Cersei is pregnant. Cersei explains that unlike Daenerys, she has no desire to make the world a better place. Her only concern is the survival of her new family, her, Jaime, and their unborn child. Many fans have speculated on the possibility that Tyrion made a secret deal with Cersei. The theory is that since Daenerys cannot have children of her own, Tyrion promised that Cersei's child will be the one who succeeds Daenerys after Daenerys dies. We don't know exactly what Tyrion and Cersei agreed upon since the scene ends prematurely, but it was enough for Cersei to pretend that she will fight alongside Jon and Daenerys. We know that Cersei is full of shit and plans to go back on her word. Her plan is to stay in King's Landing and wait for Euron Greyjoy to escort the Golden Company's sellswords to the capital. But Tyrion is still under the impression that their deal is intact. But Cersei has no knowledge of the conversations Daenerys and Tyrion have had about succession. Since Daenerys cannot have children, it wouldn't be illogical for Cersei to believe that her child could succeed Daenerys. It is a possibility. When Jon and Daenerys begin to perform their science experiment as to whether Daenerys can actually have children, Tyrion is seen creeping outside of their room. Now, his face doesn't really say, "Oh wow, my friend is getting laid. Good for you, Jon." It's more of, "Oh fuck, this girl's about to get pregnant, and I promised Cersei that her child would succeed her." His face could be mistaken for jealousy, but I don't think Tyrion is actually in love with Daenerys. I read the emotions on his face as concern. One of the most important scenes involving Daenerys in both the show and the books occurs inside of the House of the Undying. This sequence happens in Season 2 of the show, and in the books it happens in the second novel, A Clash of Kings. The show has a more condensed version of this scene in which Daenerys finds herself in the Red Keep in King's Landing. The throne room has been destroyed and King's Landing is covered in snow. Winter has finally come to the capital. Before Daenerys can reach the Iron Throne, she is drawn to the screams of her dragon, leading her past the Northern Wall and into the arms of her deceased family. In the books, the sequence is more drawn out. Daenerys is shown several visions that come true later in the story, like Robb Stark's death, visions that are seen as metaphors for the War of the Five Kings, and visions of alternate futures, like her son Rhaego conquering cities. She also sees visions of the past, like her brother Rhaegar. In what has become one of the most analyzed lines of the entire saga, Daenerys is told by the warlocks that she will face 3 betrayals in her lifetime. One for blood, one for gold, and one for love. At this point in the story, Daenerys believes that the first 2 betrayals have already happened. Mirri Maz was the first to betray the Targaryen queen, a treason for blood. Mirri promises Daenerys that she will heal Khal Drogo's wounds, but instead she infects the Khal and leaves him in a vegetated state. Daenerys did save Mirri's life, but not before Khal Drogo's Dothraki horde slaughtered her entire village, a classic case of an eye for an eye.
Why don't you take a look at your Khal? Then you will see exactly what life is worth when all the rest has gone.
The second betrayal was done by Jorah Mormont. Jorah began his service under Daenerys as a spy for King Robert Baratheon. He sold her secrets with the hope of being pardoned by the king for his crimes of selling prisoners into slavery. Instead, Jorah falls in love with Daenerys and decides to faithfully serve as her most trusted advisor and bodyguard. Daenerys eventually discovers his betrayal and banishes him from the city of Meereen, a treason for gold.
Another man. Please, Khaleesi, forgive me.
You sold my secrets to the man who killed my father
I have
and
protected
stole my
you,
brother's throne.
fought
You
for you,
want me to
killed for
forgive you.
I have loved you.
Now, the third betrayal has yet to happen, but many fans believe it could be Tyrion who betrays Daenerys for love. There is one other person who may betray Daenerys for love, and we'll discuss that on another video. Going back to the scene where Tyrion attempts to negotiate a deal with Cersei, a reoccurring topic is the love that Tyrion had for Cersei's children. Cersei can never forgive Tyrion for what happened to Tommen and Myrcella. She believes that if Tyrion never killed their father Tywin, Tommen and Myrcella would have been untouchable. And she has a point. Tywin's death created a black hole that nearly consumed House Lannister entirely. In a sense, Tyrion is indirectly responsible for the deaths of Cersei's two youngest children, a fact that he is aware of. After all the pain that his father caused him, Tyrion still hates himself for killing Tywin.
You killed our father.
After he sentenced me to death for a crime I didn't commit, yes, I killed him. Hate me for it if you want. I hate myself for it, in spite of what he was, in spite of what he did to me.
Oh, poor little man. If Papa was mean to you, do you have any idea what you did when you fired that crossbow? You left us open.
He also tells Cersei that he loved her children, regardless of his hatred for her. Up until the moment he killed his father, Tyrion never conspired against his family. Though his family members gave him several excuses to betray them, the survival of House Lannister was always his top priority. This sentiment goes back to Season 1, Episode 2, The King's Road. After Jaime's attempted murder of Bran Stark, Tyrion informs Cersei and Jaime that Bran might survive the fall. When Jaime suggests that being dead is better than being a cripple, Tyrion disagrees, adding that he'd be very interested to hear Bran's side of the story if he were to survive.
Well, even if the boy lives, he'll be a cripple, grotesque. Give me a good, clean death any day.
Speaking for the grotesques, I'd have to disagree. Death is so final, whereas life is full of possibilities. I hope the boy does wake. I'd be very interested to hear what he has to say.
Jaime questions Tyrion's loyalty, but Tyrion reaffirms that he loves his family. For all his jokes and japes, there isn't a lack of sincerity in his sentiment.
My dear brother, there are times you make me wonder whose side you're on.
My dear brother, you wound me. You know how much I love my family.
We also see this sincerity in Season 7, Episode 4. Tyrion is on hand to witness the massacre of the Lannister army by the hand of Daenerys' Dothraki horde and her dragon. Even though House Lannister is now his enemy, Tyrion remains sympathetic to their defeat. He is clearly horrified by the way his former army is being slaughtered. He begins whispering to himself as he watches his older brother Jaime charge head-on against Daenerys and Drogon. He wants his brother to flee to survive and is visibly disturbed by the notion of Jaime's impending death.
You idiot. You fucking idiot.
Taking all of this into account, one thing is clear. Tyrion Lannister still loves his family. He has lived his entire life as a realist. He is able to think as his enemies do, and he can sympathize with them when he has to. He begins Season 2 by telling Varys that he is not Ned Stark. He is not an honorable man. For all his ruthless capability, Tyrion has also shown the ability to sympathize with his enemies. Compassion is the one trait he possessed that his father didn't. And that's the main reason Tyrion is alive, and Tywin is not. But family has always come first to Tyrion. Any way that he could further the interests of House Lannister, he did. And for a long time, he was their most valuable asset, until the patriarch of the family sentenced him to death. As we've discussed in this video, Daenerys questions Tyrion's loyalty twice in Season 7, wondering out loud if Tyrion is capable of hurting his family. And it's a fair point. It's been years since Tyrion killed his father. All that built-up anger and resentment he held for his family has maybe subsided. And the reality of the horrors of war have hit him full on. For Tyrion in this war, the enemy is family, and that is unique. Now, the question is, will Tyrion betray Daenerys in Season 8 for his family? And the answer is, probably not. Sorry for wasting your time. No, just kidding. I do think it's a possibility. I don't think it will be a ruthless betrayal like Tyrion murdering Tywin on the toilet. The prophecy says Daenerys will be betrayed for love, and if the betrayal comes from Tyrion, then it will be more subtle. Maybe Tyrion is worried about Daenerys' relationship with Jon and the implications of them having a child. This might force Tyrion to tip his hand to the enemy, make a rash decision. He may even believe he is helping Daenerys in the long run. Like I've said before, Tyrion has always been a realist, but Daenerys has inspired him to become an idealist. He loves Daenerys, and he believes in her, but the bigger picture is more important to him at this point in the story. Breaking the wheel is more important to Tyrion than Daenerys' would-be child. And at this point, it feels like Tyrion is more on board with breaking the wheel than Daenerys is. Every time he brings it up now, she doesn't want to talk about it. Tyrion is the one who is trying to further her vision rather than Daenerys, so that could be the rift. Add in the fact that Tyrion feels extremely guilty about all the pain he has caused his family, and you've got a pretty solid recipe for betrayal. Guilt, distrust, an impending apocalyptic event. The relationship between Daenerys and Tyrion in Season 8 may reach a breaking point because of all these obstacles. If Daenerys is betrayed for love, it doesn't necessarily have to end with her losing her life. The first betrayal by Mirri Maz did lead to the deaths of Daenerys' husband and child, but the second betrayal by Jorah only put her life in danger. It was a betrayal that hurt Daenerys more emotionally than physically. That could also happen with Tyrion. She discovers his betrayal, and it creates a permanent rift in their relationship. Maybe Daenerys even decides to keep Tyrion on as Hand of the Queen, since the Great War will be underway, but she'll never fully trust him again. They almost become a team of rivals. She hates him for what he did, but is aware that she needs his help during the Great War. And that's another big point. The Great War doesn't really lend itself to political betrayals. With only 6 episodes left, it's hard to see them fitting in a Tyrion committing treason subplot. It looks like Episode 2 might be the biggest battle we ever see in television history, the battle for Winterfell. I don't know how they're going to fit in much politics in Season 8. It would be interesting to see them take this route with the character, and while I think it's possible, I don't think it's going to happen. A minor change that the show made from the books, one change that my friend Aaron likes to complain about all the time, is the decision to leave out the Tysha-Tyrion love story from the books. Now, Tysha is mentioned by Tyrion in Season 1. He tells Shae and Bronn about his first wife, a peasant girl named Tysha, who was rescued by Tyrion and Jaime after being accosted by a group of men. Jaime drove the men away, and Tyrion comforted Tysha for the night. The two fell in love and were married the next day.
She was too scared to send off on her own, so while Jaime hunted down the rapers, I took her to the nearest inn and fed her. Her name was Tysha. She was a wheelwright's orphan, and she was hungry. Together we finished off 3 chickens and a flagon of wine.
When Tywin discovered that his son had married a commoner, he lies to Tyrion, telling him that Tysha was a whore who was hired by the Lannisters so that Tyrion could become a man. He then had the girl gang-raped by his guards, and for each guard he gave Tysha a silver coin. He even forced Tyrion to be the last man with the girl, paying Tysha a gold coin for Tyrion, saying that Lannisters are always worth more. And that's the last time we hear of Tyrion's first wife in the show. In the books, Tysha's memory continues to haunt Tyrion throughout the series. After nearly losing his head during the Battle of the Blackwater, Tyrion has a fever dream the next morning of his brief life with Tysha. The memory of her rape is once again brought up by his older brother Jaime. We know Jaime is the one who frees Tyrion in both show and books, but in the show they leave each other on good terms. It is not until Jaime learns about Tywin's murder that he begins to harbor any resentment for his younger brother. But Tyrion never grows to hate Jaime in the show. In the books, Jaime and Tyrion leave each other on, let's say, not so great terms. It is during their final goodbye where Jaime tells Tyrion the truth, that Tysha was not a whore, that it was a story that Tywin made up to make Tyrion feel guilty about marrying her. Tyrion realizes that Tysha actually did love him and is furious with his older brother and father. This is what leads him to storm to the Tower of the Hand and kill both Tywin and Shae. The final exchange between him and his father has Tyrion asking where he sent Tysha. Tywin says that the young girl went wherever whores go. When Tywin again refers to Tysha as a whore, Tyrion shoots his father in the chest. Now, we know Tyrion Lannister as a level-headed pragmatist on the show, but in the books, he's always been a bit more ruthless. Still, he is a decent man, but the revelation about Tysha not being a whore turns him dark. His point-of-view chapters in A Dance with Dragons are filled with thoughts of murder and revenge against his sister and brother. He manipulates the people around him into causing death and chaos against the Seven Kingdoms. He is a man with a bloodlust against his own people, and this is what has kept him interesting in the books. He's been taken away from the politics of the Seven Kingdoms, but his own personal journey is almost more intriguing, because he has become such a wild card. He isn't traveling to meet Daenerys because he wishes to build a better world. He wants to burn the world and the people that spited him, using her power of fire and blood. So betrayal in the books actually makes more sense. I do believe Tyrion will come to his senses by the time he meets Daenerys in the books, maybe even after meeting her and understanding what she's about. But a betrayal for love would still make sense. Tyrion, being driven by the hatred he has for his family, will set Daenerys on a course of death and destruction. All of this stemming from the loss of his love, Tysha. And that's why leaving out the Tysha backstory hurts Tyrion's arc in the show. Tyrion has become an absolute wildcard going into the Winds of Winter. He is a genius manipulator who is now motivated by hatred. That is a dangerous combination. In the show, he has become an average manipulator who is motivated by not dying due to alcoholism. It's just not as interesting.
Dragons do not do well in captivity.
How do you know this?
That's what I do. I drink, and I know things.
There's also the possibility that Tyrion will lose his life in Season 8. We know Game of Thrones is a show that likes to kill off its main characters, and maybe his death will be due to his betrayal of Daenerys, but I think that would be kind of a lazy ending for the character. The main issue with Tyrion's current role in the series has to do with the impossibility of faithfully adapting George R.R. Martin's novels. The show has become a funnel. Season 1 introduced an ensemble cast, several different settings across its fictional globe, and a myriad of subplots, but as the years progressed, the cast, the settings, and the story became more narrow. The plots converged, leaving our characters with a singular goal: survival. With the long night steadily approaching, the focus fell on its main characters. And that was inevitable. One of the biggest criticisms of the novels is that books 4 and 5 added too many additional subplots and that George has tied himself into a literary Marinese knot. He knows the ending to the saga, he just has no idea how to get there. The show had no choice but to cut off some of the fat, eliminate some of the subplots, and put less focus on specific side characters. And in doing this, they accidentally made Tyrion Lannister, one of their main characters, a far less complex and interesting character. We had discussions here about whether we would even make a Tyrion Lannister video for Season 8 because we're just not anticipating him to have that big of a role. With all that said, I don't believe that Tyrion Lannister will betray Daenerys in Season 8. Since many fans believe that Daenerys will lose her life during the Great War, I've heard suggestions that Tyrion will be the one who succeeds her as the leader of Westeros. I've even read theories about Tyrion raising the child of Jon and Daenerys if both characters were to die in the Great War. Peter Dinklage said in an interview last year that Tyrion's story has a happy ending, which isn't something I necessarily want to hear. I mean, I would enjoy for Tyrion to have a happy ending, ride off into the sunset, die at the age of 80 with a belly full of wine.
With a belly full of wine and a girl's mouth around my cock?
But come on, Tyrion, spoilers. Or maybe Peter Dinklage is misleading us. Nothing ever good comes out of celebrity interviews. Regardless, watching Tyrion Lannister play the Game of Thrones for 9 years has been an incredible privilege for audience members like myself, and even with the highs and lows of his arc, he has solidified himself as one of the most iconic characters in television history.